Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Costa Rica Crypto. Today I have a individual on who I'm really excited about talking to, Neb, who is the founder of Infiniverse. And for those of you who don't know Infiniverse, you soon will, because I think that it's a really, really cool project and it's probably about to change the face of the way that we interact with EOS on a large scale. Welcome, Neb. It's a pleasure to have you here. And thanks so much for taking the time to come and speak with me.
Hey Matt, thanks. Great to be here. I'm really excited. I think this might be my first ever recorded interview. I've never been on TV or anything like that, so here we go.
Yeah, no, I'm excited too. I'm just a little fish, but ultimately, hopefully, this chat will enlighten some people, and then maybe you can get some big heavy hitters in your corner. I guess to start, Infiniverse, Neb, very cool. When I first looked at the project, I just kind of glanced it over, and I was interested. I thought it was a cool concept. And then I had the time to take kind of a deep dive into what you guys are actually doing. And I became really, really excited. Let's talk about kind of the premise that you speak about in the white paper, right? And that refers to augmented reality versus virtual reality, right? And augmented reality is currently being used in devices like Apple, as you kind of state on your page. What's kind of the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality?
Sure. So virtual reality, it's when you wear a head-mounted display and you completely immerse yourself into a virtual world. So something like an Oculus Rift or an HTC Vive, which completely blacks out your real surroundings and puts you somewhere else. On the other hand, augmented reality, you also experience digital content, virtual content, but you can still see your real surroundings, and all this digital content is then superimposed on top of the real world. So this can also be done with some kind of head-mounted display with a see-through glass, or it can be done just with your phone where it shows the camera's view and adds digital objects on top.
Very cool. And we're going to dig into what that has to do exactly with Infiniverse really soon. Before we go there, maybe, can you kind of give us a breakdown of who you are, where you came from, and how eventually you ended up buying EOS, and just kind of your experiences so far in the space?
Sure. So I'm Neb. I was born in Serbia. I grew up in Australia, and since then I've traveled around a lot. I've been in Amsterdam for the last year and a half. So my background is as a software engineer. I studied computer science and finance at a university in Sydney, and my whole career actually has been in augmented reality. So I started working for a company in Silicon Valley, a startup building augmented reality glasses called Meta. I was there for almost 3 years, and since then I've been a freelancer, still on augmented and virtual reality projects. I worked for clients such as Microsoft, Airbus, Verizon, and in the last year or so I've also been trying to create Infiniverse.
Okay, and what?
So in terms of EOS, I guess I've been curious about blockchain for several years. In 2013, I wrote a paper on the correlation between Bitcoin prices and Google searches and Twitter mentions of Bitcoin, and then got into it more seriously about a year and a half ago, and started buying some coins. And then when I started working on Infiniverse, I was trying to figure out how I can do this on the blockchain when, obviously transactions can take from a few minutes to hours sometimes on Ethereum. And so I saw EOS, and pretty much I was set on EOS from back in August last year when it was very, very early. So, at this point, I think I made the right choice since everything is going pretty well so far.
Yeah, it seems to 100%. We're going to kind of get into what augmented reality has to do with Infiniverse and how it all works. But just to kind of clarify, this isn't like some sort of it's not a pipe dream, right? We're not talking about something that might happen. Augmented reality is being used commonly right now. I know you guys actually have a partnership with Samsung. Do you want to kind of describe some of your experiences with Samsung and some of the work that you've done with them before we kind of proceed a little further?
Yeah. So on your first point, analysts estimate that at the end of this year, there'll be 900 million smartphones compatible with AR. So yeah, I think it's a great time to start building Infiniverse. So Samsung Next, it's a Samsung subsidiary. They do some partnerships and investments with startups, and they also are building some of their own little projects. And so Samsung Next in San Francisco is building an AR cloud. So this is basically a service for AR applications to store some of their data and do some of their augmented reality processing using their AR cloud service. So I came into contact with them at the end of last year, and we started this collaboration. So I helped them with the AR cloud service they're building. We worked directly with Samsung Next for 3 months, and we received $50,000 for our services, and also basically a perpetual license to the Wear Cloud. So we'll be able to use it in Infiniverse for free in perpetuity.
Okay, so we've talked about augmented reality. We've talked about the fact that you've been in the space for a while. We've talked that it's a growing industry, which of course it is. We're seeing a lot of glasses and a lot of talk about new products coming out in this space. What exactly is, if you were to describe it to somebody who wasn't familiar with the project or hadn't heard of you guys, what exactly is Infiniverse?
So Infiniverse, it's an augmented reality platform which allows us to create a virtual world on top of the real world. So we have some great augmented reality apps that have come out, games and so on. But the problem is, as we see it, that the world is so large, and we don't want to limit ourselves to only experiencing one type of application at once. We can have all different kinds of themes of digital content all around us. So with Infiniverse, it's a user-created virtual world. All the content on there is user-generated. There's no theme. And by allowing us to combine the creativity of, at some point, hopefully millions of people around the world, we can create this rich digital world that's living and breathing on top of the real world, where all these different kinds of themes of content and entertainment can all coexist and even interact together. And on top of that, also provide people a new opportunity of earning money in the digital world.
For sure. I think it's really cool. We're going to develop this a little bit before we move on, but I think a lot of people are kind of curious. It's obviously EOS has been the platform that's allowed you to be able to accomplish this due to some of the high transaction speeds. How much of this is actually stored in the blockchain?
So everything that determines the state of the world is stored on the blockchain. So that includes basically land ownership, which I guess we'll get into later, who owns which land, digital asset ownership, all the transactions on the marketplace, Infinicoin holdings, and then all of the actual content files. So all the large 3D files and so on will be stored on the IPFS network.
Nice.
And so the goal is that essentially, even if like a bus destroys our whole team, Infiniverse, as long as it has users, it can continue to live on. Because there have been a few virtual worlds and games that weren't profitable anymore for the company that created them, but they still had a couple million users, and so they shut down, and these couple of million users, they couldn't play anymore. But if it was all decentralized, it doesn't have to be that way. 100%.
I'm looking forward to kind of peeling down some of the layers, because I think it's really cool. I think it's a cool way to use blockchain. I would have never imagined that it would even have been possible prior to our conversation and prior to me digging into the project. This literally, we've talked a lot about EOS as virtual real estate. And funnily enough, this really kind of defines EOS as virtual real estate. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I guess I can talk about the land system. So, I talked about how we want to experience more than just one type of augmented reality app or theme at one time. But at the same time, we can't just allow anyone to leave anything anywhere, because quickly, the whole world will become this big mess of all this overlapping digital content. So you can no longer actually experience anything. And so basically, digital space in the real world is a scarce resource. So in order to place content persistently in some real world location, users need to register land. And so land is some number of square meters based on some latitude, longitude coordinates. And when they've registered it, they have the exclusive right to place whatever they want on their land. And so it works similar to the domain registration system, in that there's a yearly registration fee. This basically stops hoarding of land. But once a user has registered some land, they can freely trade it to other users. Other users can buy it from them, or they could even rent it to other users to give other users the right to place content on that land for some fixed duration.
For sure. I think that's really, really neat. We're going to talk about that. There's definitely going to be a land grab up for some of the more popular spots, I would have to imagine. What were some of the challenges? Because let's get real here. This is not an easy thing to build. What were some of the challenges that you guys kind of faced when you were developing this project and developing this, the whole idea?
Yeah, there's definitely some big challenges. It's very technically demanding. A lot of them are definitely still to be solved. But so one of the big issues is the inaccuracy of GPS and other satellite systems on smartphones.
Of course.
So we need to get the user's position and orientation relative to north accurately, so that we can display to them accurately all the digital land and assets and content that is around them, right? But the problem is GPS has about 5 meters of accuracy. So, if the GPS tells us that a user is at some spot, they might actually be a few meters away from that spot. And so what that means is that when a user sees places some content, next time they come back there, it might be a few meters off. And also, if you have two users in the same area, they might see items a few meters away from that location. So there's a number of things that will make that get better in the future. So on the one hand, we have new phones coming out that have newer GNS chips. So these are dual frequency, and basically they improve the accuracy to 0.3 meters instead of 5 meters. And there's one phone that came out this year that supported this, and hopefully there'll be a lot more phones coming out soon. So that will definitely improve the experience quite a lot. And then other than that, there's a number of companies working on technologies, notably Google. They're working on something called the visual positioning system, which basically means that they're allowing the phone to use its camera using the data from the phone's camera to match with Google's visual maps. For example, they have the Street View data. And so using that, you can very accurately get your position and orientation in the world. And so there's a number of companies working on similar things to that as well.
Very cool.
So once we can outdoors and indoors get our position very accurately, this thing will just feel just super, super solid. You leave something in some real world location, you come back the next day and it's exactly pinpoint same spot. So go on.
Sorry to interrupt you. What are people leaving? Like, I know we kind of spoke about the fact that it's virtual real estate. Do you mind kind of developing the idea? Like, I'm familiar with it, but just for anybody who might be watching, how exactly does kind of Infiniverse work? What are people leaving in these spots, or what are they maybe buying in these spots, or what are they doing with the space that they're leasing?
So, everything is user generated, so it could be anything, and there's probably things that we haven't even imagined yet that we'll see. But, in general, the kinds of things that I would expect is obviously things related to games and entertainment. So I talked about how many different kinds of themes can coexist and interact with each other. So you could have, instead of just playing your Pokemon Go or your Harry Potter AR game, you could have Pikachu fighting with Hermione, or, any kind of combination you can imagine, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then once there's a solid user base, I expect some people will be putting advertisements, that kind of stuff, in places where a lot of people are walking by. Obviously, there's also digital collectibles. So many games have this concept of digital items that you can collect. And in augmented reality, in Infiniverse, these items that you collect, you can actually see them as if they're actually in the real world with you. So they feel more valuable than in perhaps just in a computer game. And then I can also imagine educational concepts. So when we really combine the real world with digital content, I could imagine that, for example, in Rome, in the Colosseum, you could place some gladiators battling or things like that.
That sounds really cool. Educational wise too. I mean, there's a ton of uses for that, right? Maybe national landmarks, kind of putting up signs, information, classes, virtual classes that take place outdoors. But there's a ton. I mean, I really do think it's a cool concept. I understand right now you guys are using phones for the application, but with the prevalence and development of glasses, soon users are going to be able to slip on a pair of glasses and look around and actually be able to observe this world as well as the other world, which is one of the benefits of AR. You're not just staring into something blank and walking into walls. Do you want to kind of chat a little bit about the development of that and kind of maybe the timeline for the use of glasses?
So absolutely, in AR glasses, that's where the experience really comes to life. Through a phone, you're still kind of not really fully immersed, but with glasses, that's when it really starts to feel amazing.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, though, augmented reality is a really, really tough technical problem to solve for the hardware creators. It's actually a lot tougher than virtual reality because you have to, just like with self-driving cars, you have to have a really good awareness of your surroundings. The machine does.
Of course.
So it's a really tough problem to crack. So it's going to take a couple more years until we have solid augmented reality glasses. So there are a couple out at the moment. So there's Microsoft HoloLens, which came out about 2.5 years ago. There's Magic Leap, which just came out. That's a company that received about $4 billion in funding. And there's also Meta from the company I used to work at. There's rumors that Apple will be releasing some glasses in 2020. So, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, I'm hoping for the sooner, because sooner the better, but it does take a while for this technology to really get there. But when it does, it will be amazing.
Absolutely. And I think augmented reality is becoming more and more popular and more prevalent on cell phones, right? It's just a matter of taking the time to kind of be able to develop it to the next step. And I can imagine, of course, it becomes a totally new ball game. You've got the glasses on and you're trying not to plant things in the middle of walls or buildings or everything else. So it becomes a lot more of a complex problem. We've seen a lot of these AR applications released, right? This kind of seems like the one to rule them all. Like you've talked about the fact that this is gonna kind of integrate with various other ones. What's the plan on that, and how exactly is that all going to work?
So, I still expect that if you just really want to play Pokemon and only see Pokemon Go will be great for that. And, any other game that has a single theme, when you're really into that, then you're not going to be using Infiniverse, you'll be using that game by itself. And so where Infiniverse really shines is that it allows us to add up all this different content into this one world. And so, of course, we want to allow people to add their existing content and games into Infiniverse. At the same time, it should be clear that when you have other games that are already world scale, so Pokemon Go and others like that, you can't really fit several world scale games into one, right? So you're not going to be able to have the full experience of all of these games into Infiniverse. Instead, each of these games could create some little mini version or something like that and put that into Infiniverse, or in various lands around the world in Infiniverse, and then people will be able to experience all this different kind of stuff.
So that's super cool. We've talked about kind of some of the use cases. We've talked about the fact that it would be really good for education. We've talked about the fact that it would be really good for gaming, which is something that's already happening, and it's kind of this would be a cool app to kind of integrate all of it. But the one thing that really strikes me, and the one thing that I think it could become even more popular for, is advertising, right? I can just picture when the release date hits, a bunch of people running around to landmarks, trying to scoop these landmarks up and trying to kind of buy the space if possible. How does it all work? I understand there's a user registration fee for those landmarks, and I also understand that you can kind of place moving advertisements. So I picture this world where we have these like really beautiful women being followed by, kind of these roving Michelin men and just various advertisements where it could get pretty interesting. How does it all work in terms of the land registration and the advertising?
Yeah, so there's a couple of points you touched on there. So I just want to clarify for the land registration. So initially, the way we were imagining it was that you have to actually be in the real world position to register some land. And the reason for that was that, I thought it would be cool that you kind of give locals the first opportunity to grab, the land in their country. But unfortunately, the problem is that, another of the issues, that the challenges with Infiniverse is basically GPS spoofing. So on your smartphone, you can really easily fake your position. I'm in Amsterdam, I can say I'm in New York Times Square. Now, there are some ways to try to detect that. There are some things we can do potentially, but all of that would basically impact the decentralization of the app, and it might not be 100% effective also. So it would result in putting people in an uneven playing field. You have some people who are technically skilled, they know how to get around that, they can buy all the land around the world where they want, and you have others that wouldn't have that advantage. So we decided to, instead, we'll have a web-based tool where you can just buy land around the world wherever you want. Everyone's in an even playing field, but you'll still be able to go out and buy with your phone as well. In the future, there actually will be, so there's a number of companies working on decentralized proof of location, and that's going to be important for us. And we're actually announcing a partnership with one of them next week. Cool. But that's not going to be ready, in Q4 when we release this to beta. So now that that's out of the way, we talked about the advertisements. So there's essentially two types of content in Infiniverse. So once you own some digital assets, in order to show them to the world, you can either, other than putting on the marketplace, you can either buy some land, rent some land, and place it there persistently. So this becomes persistent content. It stays in that location for as long as you keep it there. Even if you quit the app, you're not running Infiniverse right now, it's going to be there. And then you have attached content. So that's any kind of digital object that you attach to yourself, and that follows you around in the world. So you go for a walk with Infiniverse, and whatever you've got attached to yourself follows you around. So now going back to the advertisements. So if you think of some places with a lot of foot traffic like Times Square, New York, obviously you could buy land there and you could place persistent ads there. At the same time, once all of that land is gone and maybe renting it becomes too expensive for you, you can just attach some ads to yourself, like digital billboards, and just go and hang around Times Square yourself, walk around there, and people will see, whatever you've got attached to yourself, which can be these ads. Or you could pay someone else to go and do that for you.
I see a real market for that. I could, I really do. I think that that's a really, really neat concept. And I think that it really changes the way that we do marketing and advertising. And augmented reality isn't one of those things that, hey, maybe this will work. Like, it's already being used and it's just gaining steam. If companies like Google and Apple are spending money developing some of the tools, obviously they see the need, there is a market demand for it. So it's going to get pretty interesting pretty quickly. That was the one thing that really struck me. I like the fact, the gladiators is a cool thing too, watching gladiators fight in Rome or something like that. But I think that the capacity for advertising, the capacity to be able to create kind of digital artwork, to maybe showcase your artwork and to create digital content, to be able to do some advertising is pretty interesting, and it opens up a whole new universe. I want to kind of move on to talk about Infinicoin a little bit, and just kind of basically some of the basic token use cases. I know one of them, of course, is going to be an Infinicoin. For anybody who doesn't know, is kind of the cryptocurrency asset of Infiniverse. One of them is for selling content on the marketplace. Another one is for renting and selling land, placing premium content on land, and then doing jobs for others. So essentially, is this going to kind of be the way that people transact in terms of doing jobs for others, or what's the plan with Infinicoin?
Yeah, so just first off, I just want to be really clear that Infinicoin is a pure utility token. So it's not designed for speculation or to go up and increase in value. We have a monetary policy specifically in order to keep it as a stable store of value for the Infiniverse economy. Because what's the currency used in Costa Rica?
Currently in Costa Rica, we have the colone.
Okay, so the colone, if you can imagine that the colone would go up and down by 10, 20, 50% every day. And then the people selling stuff in the shops, they have to constantly adjust their prices because, a lot of your products are obviously imported. So it would just be chaos, right? And that's why I don't think Bitcoin will ever be suitable to be used as a transactional currency. And so for that reason, we have this very specific monetary policy we've designed in order to keep the price level in terms of Infinicoin inside the economy stable. And so having said that, in order to earn Infinicoin, so yeah, absolutely, Infiniverse is all about the content. So selling stuff on the marketplace, you could either create something that has an unlimited number of copies. So you as a person who uploaded into Infiniverse, you retain the copyright. So if you sell it to someone, they can trade that copy to someone else, but you have the only right to create more copies to sell to other people. Or you can list something as unique. And in that case, once you sell it to someone, there's only one copy and it's gone. You can't make any more copies and you don't have it anymore. So then we've got renting and selling land that we talked about before. There's placing premium content on land. So the stuff you place on your land, it can be advertisements, but it can also be something that people have to pay a small fee to unlock with a microtransaction. And later on, this can become a lot more interesting. So someone could make perhaps a digital web shop where you're walking around the city, you come across this digital store, and they're actually selling digital products to you right there in that store. And other than that, there's also, as you mentioned, doing jobs for other users. So basically, the main one I can think of so far is attaching content or ads to yourself and walking around, which you seem to love very, very much.
I do enjoy it because it creates just a weird blend in between virtual and augmented in the real world. And I could just, my twisted mind is imagining some really weird but fun and interesting stuff. So I think that's I love it. I love the fact that you can buy this. This is, I can buy this land. I like the fact that you're trying to keep it stable because you don't want it speculated on, because of course when people start speculating, they don't use the product itself. So I understand where the passion for that comes from as well. I agree with that. I think that it's really cool that you decided to do that. But yeah, truth of the matter, I think it's interesting. I think it's cool. I think that it's a whole new use case for EOS, and I think that bringing augmented reality to the blockchain is really neat. So I like it, man. I really do.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
I hope many other people will feel the same way.
I think they will. It's always kind of hard, when you first hear an idea to really be able to conceptualize it. But I encourage people to go check out the white paper, because you can start wrapping your head around this, and you can start seeing that this has some serious utility, not only for individuals but for businesses, and in a whole new way. And it's cool that you're doing it on EOS. It's cool that the fact that EOS allows this to happen. So I want to kind of touch back on something. You spoke about decentralization, of course, right? Being very, very important to you. And of course, inflation adjustments we spoke about already, done via smart contract. Why is the decentralization of this platform so important to you? You spoke about the fact that if something, hopefully not, but something were to happen to the team, it could continue. Is that kind of your main motivation, or do you have other motivations as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. That's definitely one of them. So as I mentioned, it's terrible that something you're really into, and we hope people will spend a lot of time to build something really nice that they're really proud of, that they really want to show off to other people in the world, and then to just have that taken away from you when there's all these other people that still want to experience it with you. It just must feel terrible, So we don't want that to be able to happen. At the same time, there's a lot of other benefits from having using a blockchain virtual currency. People selling stuff on the shops, on the marketplace, they get immediate access to their revenue. They can transact instantly with people around the world with no need for a intermediary to hold their money for them. And just to basically give power to people for this world that they're all actually building together. Because we're not building the world, we're building the platform that allows the world to exist, but it's all the people, the creators, the content designers and developers that will actually create all the amazing things that you'll be able to experience.
Yeah, for sure. We both know that a lot of content creators are, with revenue systems are not necessarily given priority. So I think that that's really, really cool that Infiniverse is giving people who are creative and are interesting an opportunity to be able to take some of that and put some of the benefits of that back in their own pocket. Now comes the hard question. Are you ready for this?
I hope so.
All right. So we talked about decentralization. We also talked about collectibles in the sense that you can buy collectibles and you can put them in various places. Okay. Now, for some reason, once again, with my mind, the first thing that I came to was I have this, like, and this is all hypothetical, right? I don't have a boss. Rather, I work in various businesses, but you got a boss, and this guy just drives you nuts at work. I mean, he's always on top of you. He's always grinding you. You can't get a minute of peace. Never appreciates anything you do. So you have Infiniverse. Is there anything to prevent in the system, like, I don't like my boss, so maybe I place a statue of something really, really inappropriate on his lawn. Is that possible? Is there anything in the system to circumvent that, or to circumvent maybe some opportunities where people who have unfortunate, we're just going to use a euphemism here, unfortunate minds or unfortunate thought patterns, to be able to do something that, whether it was related to maybe hate speech or something that was kind of discriminatory? Is there anything built into the system to circumvent that, or how could that ultimately be regulated while still providing a free market?
Yeah, it's a great question. So initially, before we reach full levels of decentralization, so we're going to remove anything that's illegal or abusive, because obviously we want this thing to take off. We don't want the Google Play Store, the Apple iOS Store to remove our app. Sure. And then in the future, where we'd like to implement a system where, I guess kind of like EOS voting for block producers, where people can basically nominate themselves to become moderators of the world. And then when someone reports some content as being illegal or abusive, then the moderators can check the reports and remove it if that's the case. For sure. It's just, we have to be really careful, because there's obviously a fine line between freedom of speech and abuse. So it's definitely a challenge, and I would say a hot topic these days. So yeah, just finding that line is going to be tricky, but we would like to give as much power to people as possible.
Yeah, it is a tough line, because ultimately you want to give people the power to be able to exercise their creative process and do things that may elicit reactions, but at the same time, it's a fine line to toe. in between, allowing people who just have malicious intentions to be able to take control of the system. And I think that that's a good idea for I won't say policing it because that's a really bad word, but it's a great idea for monitoring it, is to create maybe an elected representatives who can vote or at least bring things to a vote to others and kind of decide whether or not this is something that's better for humanity or not.
Yeah, I mean, basically, of course, we don't want to do anything illegal.
No.
We don't want to face the consequences, and we don't want to limit our exposure of the app, but also we don't want to allow things that will basically turn away more users than we'll bring in, right?
100%. Yeah, I think that's really cool, and I think it's an interesting concept. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'll definitely be using it 100%. I kind of, when I first saw this, I started going through the white paper. I guess I'm kind of creative in some ways, so my first reaction was to start thinking, like, how could this be used? And some of the things that I kind of came up with were like maybe virtual events in the future, where you have a bunch of people over and you rent out a space and you can place various exhibits around the space that people can go and look at. Of course, we spoke about, national parks, educational walkthroughs at national parks, representations of maybe like battles at historic events, and all sorts of really, really cool things. What have you kind of dreamt up? Because of course, being the creator of this thing, you've got to have some cool ideas. What do you think ideally the coolest use case for this could possibly be? What's some of the ideas that you kind of have stewing in the back of your brain about how Infiniverse could be utilized?
So I just want to firstly make it clear that, some of those things you mentioned, like some, let's say, museum AR tours and things like that, you don't need Infiniverse to do that. A museum can create their own AR app and do that. So the reason to use Infiniverse to do any of these things is for the interaction with all of the other content in Infiniverse. So sometimes that might make sense, and sometimes that might not make sense.
That's honest.
So having said that, in terms of kinds of things that I can imagine, I'm just imagining this digital world, which is so rich and full of content that basically whenever you go to travel somewhere, you just go walking on the streets or into the city and you see cool new stuff. You see some shops, you see some fountains. I want it to be just as cool to see what the digital world, what the digital layer in all those places has to offer as well. So I know that's not a specific thing in mind, but I just mean, I want it to be cool stuff everywhere. Entertainment things, educational things, I just want people to want to go and see like what is going on around me in the digital layer. Just like we go and check out what's going on, there's some band playing in the square or whatever. I want people to see what's going on in the digital layer as well.
Yeah, I can see that too. And maybe, if you're traveling to a new city or something like that, you're kind of excited to slip on the glasses and see what people are doing, what they're up to, and what they're kind of thinking. And of course, this allows it allows a whole new layer of expressionism in art. You know what I mean? Because of course somebody can't go and paint their mural on the side of a building, but they can create something that's really, really neat in 3D in a new spot and allow other people to interact with it. And it's just a whole new dimension to traveling and to being outside. So that's why I'm kind of like, I get it. I understand what you're doing. I think it's cool, man. When did you kind of realize that, like, hey, when did this idea hit you? When did you realize that, like, I could do this? EOS would be great for it on the blockchain, and then kind of start taking some steps to do it. It was like a moment, a conversation. What was it?
Yeah, so I came up with the idea in July last year. Basically, augmented reality, I'd been working on augmented reality glasses for a while at Meta, but last year it started coming out on phones. So Apple made their announcement of AR Kit, and then soon after that, Google for AR Core. So I started realizing that, okay, very soon there's going to be a lot of devices, many millions of potential users of augmented reality. And so I started thinking of, what I'd love to do with that. And this kind of virtual world on top of the real world came to me. I'd seen some kind of similar projects, blockchain based, which were doing this kind of thing in virtual reality. But, my thing is really augmented reality. And I just really wanted to do that, to create this digital world on top of the real world. And then, in terms of EOS, about a month after that, I started looking into that and really decided that EOS seems to be the way to go.
Yeah, 100%. It was interesting too. I'm just going to be honest with you. When I kind of heard of augmented reality versus virtual reality, I kind of thought like, virtual reality is way cooler. But in essence, it's not, because you're actually allowing people to interact with the environment that's inside of them, where virtual reality just blocks everything off. You're wearing glasses. It's more of an interactive thing. And it's something that you can really enjoy with a friend, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Around kind of, and you're not walking into walls. So that's fantastic too. I think.
Yeah. Look, I'm not like, virtual reality sucks or anything like that. Yeah. I think there's great use cases for virtual reality. Yeah. But, of course, augmented reality, as you said, you don't have to block yourself out from other people. You can still interact with other people. You can still look at them. So I think that's really powerful.
And it's a moving thing too. Get people out, get people active. And
yeah, exactly.
Right. So I like it. I like it a lot. I know, let's talk about the roadmap a little bit. I know you guys are currently in private beta. I'll give my left toe to slide into that thing. But what's kind of the roadmap for the future? Like, when are people going to be able to start interacting with Infiniverse and start playing around with the app?
So we're currently in private alpha.
Alpha, sorry.
Yeah. So in Q4, we're going to launch the public beta. And at the same time, we're going to airdrop in Infinicoin to EOS owners. So to encourage them to check out the platform, hopefully start buying some land, putting stuff there. So in the initial version, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to register land, and you'll be able to place 3D models on land. And so, then we'll build this up further and further. So next step after that will be these models will be able to be animated. They'll be able to move around. After that, these will be interactive experiences. So you can, tap them, say something to them, and they'll interact back to you depending on what exactly you did. And then these can even move into, like mini games and stuff like that. So people first will just be uploading 3D models, but then we'll have an SDK that we build on Unity. That's a platform for games and 3D development. And they'll be able to use this to create these interactive experiences and mini games.
Do you expect, of course, the initial user base will probably be primarily more private than anything, but do you expect commercial user base and, commercial, do you expect large companies to kind of come in and begin using this app, or is that non-ideal, or what's kind of the perfect vision in your mind?
So absolutely, as you said, initially it'll be mostly private users because, when there's not that many users, there's not much incentive for a company. But as the user base grows, as there's many users using this kind of thing, if there's opportunities for exposure to their content or their ads or their digital web shops, I definitely see companies coming in, buying or renting some land, putting their stuff there. I don't have anything particularly against this. Just like when you're walking around the real world, you have lots of shops and stuff that you can interact with and buy stuff from. So I don't have anything against companies putting their content in Infiniverse.
For sure. And I can see that being a big use case as the platform grows as well. I'm excited. I think it's a neat DAPP. I think what you're doing is really, really cool. It hasn't ever been done before on the blockchain, and it's on EOS, and I love that. So I'm going to post all your links below. I'm going to post links to your Telegram, and then people can come and join you. I'm also going to post the links to your website, where, of course, you'll be giving updates about the airdrop as we move closer. And I encourage anybody to come and reach out to you, because you're really approachable, and I know that you're more than happy to do interviews. So I want to see this thing grow. I think it's really neat, and I'm really impressed by what you're doing, and I think a lot of other people will be too. Do you have any final kind of thoughts or anything you want to say to the community before I let you go kind of take over the world?
Yeah, thanks a lot for your kind words. I hope people will check it out. I hope they'll, when it comes out, I really hope they'll open the app and try to buy some land and see what they can do with it. Obviously, it's going to be pretty early on. When it first comes out, there's a lot of technical challenges to overcome and really get it to the vision. But, come build Infiniverse with us, come be part of the early community, and, hopefully we'll be able to build something amazing together.
I think you will, Neb. You've got the experience, you've got the ideas, you've got the relationships. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming out. I'm looking forward to participating in the public beta. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. I thank you so much for your time. And I encourage everybody to go hit up their Telegram, go chat with Neb. Very approachable, very good guy, and a visionary in the space. So it's been a pleasure. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks so much.
Pleasure, buddy. See you soon.
Bye.